Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending the keynote speech session of the Kamall's 25th year anniversary conference. My name is Yuri Chang, and I'm the moderator of this session. Before we begin the main part of the session, I'm very honored and excited to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Dr. Randall Sadler. Dr. Randall Sadler is Associate Professor of Linguistics and Director of TESOL and ESL at the University of Illinois. He teaches courses on collaboration, virtual reality, language learning, and teaching second language reading and writing. He has published in journals including Calico Journal, Recall, Language Learning and Technology, Computers and Education, ELT, and in numerous edited volumes. His books include Virtual Worlds, Telecollaboration, and Language Learning, published in 2012 by Peter Lang, The Handbook of Informal Language Learning, published in 2020 by Wiley Blackwell, and New Ways in Teaching with Games, published in 2020 by TESOL. He is the current president of Calico, the Computer Assisted Language Instruction Consortium. Today, he's going to give a lecture entitled Going Meta for Language Learning, from Text-Based to Immersive Realities. As his former student, I'm very sure you will enjoy his lecture today. Now, please welcome Dr. Sadler with a big round of applause.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for coming on what's morning for you, evening for you. You know, as is tradition, I have here lots of thanks on the slides for the invitation, and as noted, there's a couple previous students of mine in the audience out there, and I'm really happy to be able to see them again, even if it's at a distance. But again, especially thanks to all of you for attending. I know it's fairly early in the morning for you. Believe it or not, this is kind of my bedtime here for me, 8 p.m., because I get up very, very early. But thank you again for the invitation. It's really wonderful for me. So my focus on this talk is really about the metaverse. There's some big questions, and the first question is there a metaverse? We hear the term all the time. Does it really exist? Where did it come from? And how can we use it now? Because as teachers, I think that's very important. I always like to look back. I like to look back in time. This picture is from the 1970s, right here at the University of Illinois. Here you see this woman pointing at that computer screen. Plato 4 computer. I don't know if anybody knows that. That's 1972. Long before most of you were probably born, not me, but long before for most of you. And what does this all mean? Well, that lady's not pointing at the computer. 1972, that's a touch screen computer in 1972. And Plato had all these things that were in it: message board, email, chat room, instant messaging, emoticons. These are the first emoticons that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. Online games and role-playing games, and 12,000 hours of coursework for languages and math and science. 1972. So some of these things that we think are new, they're not new. They've been around for many decades, actually, which I love. 50 years ago now, 50 years ago, these things existed. We didn't use them. Most people, that's the difference. So let's look forward a little bit more, because something that happened a little bit later was this thing called MUDs, right? These were text-based, no graphics, only text. And there's a couple examples. You could go into these text-based environments, but you could still meet people, only text communication. I used to take my students in this one called British Legends. I had a student kill me in British Legends. It was very awkward, but text-based. So what does that mean? Is that really an immersive reality? I think it is, because if we think about how a good book can immerse us into a world, there's a quote from Harry Potter. Many of you might recognize this. Harry is getting up in the morning. He has to sleep under the stairs. when we read these words, whether they're in English or Korean or another language, we're immersed. And we, in our minds, we see an image like this. It is an immersive experience. It's an immersive reality, even though it's text-based. But as time went on, what happened with these environments is they became, of course, happily, more complicated. They became something called moves, which we used in education. When I started as a graduate student, we still used moves to work with our students. I used to hold office hours in a move, all text-based again, but for human-to-human interaction in this text-based space. And I could have my own text-based classroom, my own office that I could customize and I could do things with. But it advanced some more. But for most students nowadays, that's too boring, right? But then things started to change with something called quantum link and habitat. Some of you might recognize this name over here, Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm probably is best known for Star Wars. That's where Star Wars came from. And it looked like this. So all together with habitat, you could see these avatars, now avatars. You could meet avatars, you could talk with them, you could go meet new people. But look at all this stuff that Quantum Link included. Again, 1986, all of these elements, including shopping, 18 years before Amazon, 10 years before Google, there was online shopping, things we don't think about today. But the advancements kept coming. It looks more and more similar to what we're used to today as we think some more. Here's one that some of you might know, maybe not, it's an older one. This was one of the first real 3D virtual worlds. There I am in avatar form, Randall Renoir, in active worlds. Looks kind of primitive, but you have an avatar in 3 dimensions. You can go in these environments, you can explore, and active worlds isn't so popular anymore, but there used to be hundreds and hundreds of places in active worlds for education. A lot of language learning took place in active worlds. It's very popular. And there are a lot more. Some people may know one called Habbo. Habbo is a social virtual world. Each Habbo looks like a hotel. So for different languages, you can see there, Finnish, Spanish, Italian, Dutch, Portuguese, no Korean, sadly, right? But think about that for your language students. If you want them to practice English, they could go to the English Habbo Hotel. It's all going to be text chat. But almost everything they hear is going to be in English. This Habbo Hotel you see in the picture, that's one for Spanish, and you can see all the conversations are happening in Spanish. For young kids, because Habbo is probably teenagers, young kids, Club Penguin has been around a long time, first by Disney, now it's a fan-made one. Everybody's a penguin, much safer place, lots of protections for the kids in Club Penguin. They can't even do things like give a phone number, it won't let them do it. So it's a very interesting environment. Again, places that kids could practice language informally in this case. And everybody gets an igloo. There's my igloo. And the one I've done a lot of work in that some of you may know, it's one called Second Life. There I am in Second Life as a hobbit talking to a dragon. It's a social community. There are many thousands of islands. The amount of virtual land in Second Life is about the size of California. So it's a very big space. You can do text chat, you can do oral chat, lots of languages, lots of educational users, but it's definitely not for younger learners. And there's a member of your audience who I worked with. I'm going to leave the name out of it, but you can figure out who he is, who we built a helicopter airport in Second Life for some research. So there are lots of interesting things you can do in environments like this. There's an ancient Kyoto in Second Life, and you can maybe see the avatars are all speaking and text chatting in Japanese in this case. So there are lots of places to practice language. This is not the metaverse, of course. Here's another one. Any of you are welcome to come here, by the way. This is an island I own in Second Life called Edunation. I like to build things in virtual worlds. So here's one I call the Sky Sim up above. The one below is a Chateau Renoir, and there are lots of other things in there as well. And again, anyone, if you're interested, drop me an email. I can meet people in there and I can show people around. I'm working with my students in there actually right now. But what's the metaverse? We've kind of moved forward in time, but really, what is it? Well, if you look on Amazon right now, there are a whole bunch of books about the metaverse. Some say it will revolutionize everything. You get other books that say it's going to be the next big thing. For some reason, those books use the exact same colors. I'm not sure why. It's going to be the next big thing, though. Others say it's going to make you rich. Many of you might be familiar with NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Are they the same thing as the metaverse? Are they different? These books don't seem to know, but they want you to buy the books. That's the important thing. And of course, people talk about the fact that land in the metaverse is selling for big money. Here's a property that sold for US $450,000 next to the rapper Snoop Dogg's virtual land. That's a crazy amount of money, by the way. So this kind of hype is very big right now, and it all seems to be connected to this idea of the metaverse. And even Hollywood is in on it. I'm guessing some of you saw one or both of these movies. Ready Player One, Steven Spielberg, very popular movie, a couple years ago, I think. Free Guy, about a year or so ago. Both of these movies actually take place in a metaverse. Ironically, the most realistic version of the metaverse right now is Hollywood, not any of these companies. Those are both pretty popular movies. The result of all this, of course, is now we have the billionaires, like the owners of Amazon and Google. They're doing battle. They all want to control the metaverse, and they're making it a big mess. But none of this really still tells us what the metaverse actually is. So what is it? Well, I don't know if anyone's read this book. It's an old book, 1992, by an author called Neal Stephenson, called Snow Crash. This is where the idea of the metaverse came from. It's all from this author. He's the one who started the whole concept. Let me read this quote for you. This is from the book. Hero, the main character, spends his time in a world where he is not seeing real people, of course. This is all a part of the moving illustration drawn by his computer, according to specifications coming down the fiber optic cable. The people are pieces of software called avatars. They are the audiovisual bodies that people use to communicate with each other in the metaverse. So here we have some key words. Metaverse, avatars. He wasn't the first to use avatars, but he was almost the first. Fiber optics, yep, we use those all the time now. But it's this idea of a full immersion. It's like you're living in this virtual environment. So 1992 then, maybe it's the birth of this idea of the metaverse. And most people agree on that, but they're wrong. It's not the first idea of the metaverse. Let's go way back. Take a look at this book cover. This book cover, as you can see, is from 1935. 1935. Pygmalion Spectacles. Spectacles is an old name for glasses, for eyeglasses, by Stanley Weinbaum. And you can see back in 1935, he came up with this story. And let's do another quote from a character. The main character's name is Dr. Ludwig. So here's the quote. Listen, I'm Albert Ludwig, Professor Ludwig. As Dan was silent, he continued. It means nothing to you, eh? But listen, a movie that gives one sight and sound. Suppose now that I add taste, smell, even touch, if your interest is taken by the story. Suppose I make it so that you are in the story. You speak to the shadows, and the shadows reply. And instead of being on a screen, stories all around you, and you are in it. Would that be to make real a dream? So this vision of Pygmalion spectacles, he doesn't call it the metaverse, but it's really kind of the metaverse, from 1935. If anyone here saw Ready Player One, this probably sounds very familiar because this is the sort of experience in Ready Player One, or Free Guy, same thing. It's a very similar experience. And keep in mind, this was 60 years before Active Worlds came about, 57 years before Snow Crash, where the term metaverse came about. So this idea, again, has been around a long time. But what really is the metaverse? Well, if you break down the word, meta means beyond. Universe means universe. And metaverse is beyond the universe. So it's something that goes past where we live today. And I think that's a very important idea. Because for me, the problem is right now, the metaverse does not exist. Some people might disagree, but I think the metaverse absolutely does not exist. The term is getting used by a lot of companies, like Meta, right? Meta, who created the Meta Quest 2 headset, right? The one I use. They use this term to kind of give hype for their own headsets, their own platforms. But the problem is this idea, a lot of them have, these companies, that they have of what the metaverse is. It is not the metaverse. It's the opposite of the metaverse. It's only designed for profit. Right? And I'll talk to you in a bit about what that really means. Because this image is one I put together, I call it my metaverse manifesto or my metaverse demands. For me, all of these elements have to come together for us to have the metaverse. If we look up here in the upper left, has to have interactivity. I think that makes sense. Virtual worlds do that. You can meet other avatars, you can do things together. There has to be avatars. Immersion, you have to feel like you're in there. I think VR does that now. If those of you who have been in VR know, VR is pretty immersive. The ultimate, which doesn't exist yet, would be down here, what I call neural reality, where you don't even need a headset, just hooks directly into your brain. But who wants to do that? Sounds dangerous. But these elements over here are more problematic. Open access, persistent. Here's where we start to have a problem. And I think about it this way. Everybody think about the internet. But imagine the internet if it was impossible to travel from the Amazon site to the Wikipedia site to the Samsung site between any of the major sites. Imagine if that was impossible. That wouldn't be the internet, right? Well, this is one of the elements that the metaverse has to have. You have to be able to travel between things like Second Life, like Active Worlds, like a lot of these VR apps, easily. Right now you can't. The internet you can. I can easily go from one site to another. So think about it as an internet that is fully immersive with avatars where everything's connected. So you could be in Second Life, and then you could, with your avatar, you could move over to Pokemon Go, or One of Us, or League of Legends, or the University of Illinois virtual campus and attend a class, all using the same avatar and keeping your same inventory. Right? You've got a wonderful sword in League of Legends. You could take it with you into, well, hopefully not into your class in University of Illinois, but you could take it other places too. We can't do that now. And that means we don't have a metaverse. So some of us, have been here for a while working in this sort of thing. And I think the biggest challenge to having a metaverse right now, sadly, is the companies. because to get a true metaverse, they have to work together. And when the internet started, they were all working together to create the internet. A lot of it was government funding. We don't have that right now. So we have this company and this company. They don't want to share their technology. They don't want to share their websites. So it makes it a little bit difficult to actually have anything like a metaverse. But I keep my fingers crossed. Maybe one day. So if we don't have a metaverse, where are we now? What do we have? And will we ever get to this idea of a metaverse that we all want? Well, what we do have now is virtual reality. And nothing, I love virtual reality. I'm working with students on 3 different VR projects right now. One of them I'll show you in a minute. Sometimes when people talk about VR, they talk about low immersion VR. That would be like the ones I showed you. Second Life, Active Worlds, Club Penguin, ones you play on your computer. Right? And then high immersion VR, you've got to have a headset. Right? That's how you get high immersion. Because again, if you've been in high immersion VR, if you put on the headset, you really can forget where you are. You feel like you're in the space, whatever that space is. It's a very different experience from being on your computer. So high immersion VR is where there's some very interesting research being done right now. And there are some great environments or platforms that have strong potential for education because they are big open environments, or sometimes small but really useful environments. I don't know if anybody knows any of these. The best known probably right now is Horizon Worlds, because that's from Facebook. Facebook controls everything. But the Sandbox is another one, Decentraland, Somnium Space. These are all big VR environments that are trying to become mini worlds, I guess you'd call them, and are slowly giving us the ability to create things, because that's quite important to me, to be able to create things in these environments. They're kind of clunky right now, but they're there. They have potential. These are all. There's some other apps that are really useful. I did some research on these 6 apps with a student here at University of Illinois. Her name is Tricia Thrasher. She was a PhD student in French. Now she's graduated and she's actually working for a VR company. So you can get jobs for education in these spaces. I'm not sure if anybody knows any of these spaces. VR chat's quite popular, aimed more at the teen audience. I find it too crazy, too obnoxious. It's not for me. VTime, great for small meetings. Alcove was actually created, I don't mean this in a bad way, but Alcove was created for old people by the American Association for Retired People. But it's got some really cool features in it, like a travel room, which it could be very useful if you want to do language practice. So even though it's just the size is one house, it's the whole space, one house that you control. But there's a TV where you can use videos, there are places for pictures, there's games built in, there's 360 movies built in, a globe that you can click in various places around the world to travel there via VR to see different locations. It's very cool. AltSpace looks a little more cartoony, but it's a very social environment. And there are groups in AltSpace right now doing language exchange hours. So several times a week, you can go into AltSpace, it's scheduled. And if you go to the place where this is scheduled, there'll be someone there and a big group of people, avatars. And the person in charge will say, all right, who wants to practice English? Go over there. Who wants to practice Japanese? Go over there. Korean, over there. French, over there. And you meet with other avatars and you practice the language. Spatial is another interesting one. Spatial started really for business people at the start of the pandemic. I don't think that was going to work. But now you can go into Spatial and it's much more open. I was in there about a week ago and stumbled across 3 people from Japan setting up an art gallery in Spatial. So it's, there is an avatar, a very large space. They probably had hanging on the walls somewhere around 100 digital artworks. They were selling them as non-fungible tokens. I don't know about that model, but the art was gorgeous, very anime style art. So there are very interesting things happening in spatial. If people are looking for a space to do potentially some research in, to meet with people, and as time goes forward, to design your own custom spaces in a VR environment, spatial is worth looking at. Again, none of these are the metaverse, but they're still really interesting VR environments. And the reason none of these are from the metaverse goes back to what I was saying. They have these elements here. They're VR, great. But if we go over here, some of these, for example, will only work on the Oculus Quest 2 headset. That's a problem. None of these, I can't design stuff in spatial and just put it in my virtual suitcase and take it over to VR chat. It doesn't work that way. Everything's not connected. I have to leave one to go to another one. So there are some problems. There are companies now that are starting to design things so you can have an avatar. For example, I have an avatar using spatial, and I can take that avatar to some other virtual environments. That's an important step, actually. It's another step towards the metaverse. So when that happened about a year and a half ago, it made me quite excited, actually. Okay, so we don't have it. We don't have the metaverse. VR is evolving. So how do you use it? Well, let's look at an example. This example is from some research that I did with a group of people, including my now graduated student, Tricia Thrasher, that I mentioned. And this was using a VR app called Immerse. Now, if anybody here does stuff in VR, you may be confused, because VR apps love the term immerse. So there's one called Immerse. There's one called Immerse Me. I think there's another one called Immersion. None of them are the same, but they're different apps. This one is called Immerse. A lot of the language learning apps you see out there that use VR, what they're designed for is you put on your headset and then you go into a program, but it's you interacting with the computer, right? So maybe you see a video in VR, and then based on the video, you say, do you want to click to say this back or this back or this back? And if you say the wrong thing, you'll get feedback. If you say the right thing, you'll see a new video. So that is still VR, still immersive, but it's human to computer interaction. The reason I like Immerse is because this is human to human interaction in VR. So this environment was designed to provide spaces, and we'll look at some of them in a minute, to provide spaces in VR where a teacher could meet with a group of students. Right now it's up to 7 or 8 students, which seems like a small number, but in VR, believe me, that's 7 or 8 is plenty. It's challenging. They could meet in various environments to practice language learning with them. So how does this work? Well, here we see one environment. This is a backyard barbecue. Here's another one, which is a medical center. And what Immerse does is it provides some lesson plans already made. Right now, by the way, the lesson plans are for English, Spanish, and Japanese, but they're adding new languages as time goes on. I know many of you would be focused on English. That's good. It's already out there. My wife, however, is a professor of Japanese. She's downstairs watching TV right now. So it's great that they have Japanese in here as well. So they do provide some lessons that are already made, lesson plans that are in there and tell you how to do the lessons. So here, for example, you can see another one, and you're going to see a little video of this one later. This is an art gallery. And you can see you can also add your own notes. We added some words for French, grand, faute, pardon my French pronunciation. I'm sure it's horrible, not my language. But you can add elements like that. So here are the people that were involved. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You know me. I mentioned Tricia. We worked with two professor and a classroom teacher in Barcelona, Spain. Right? So Melinda Dooley is someone I've been doing research with for a long time. Monica is a classroom teacher in Spain. And we worked with 24 sixth grade students in Barcelona. Sixth graders, very young, very crazy.
Wow.
Sixth graders. Yeah. So in Immerse, they have 34 different locations that you can use. You can see some of them there, very easy to get to. And you can customize the spaces, which I think is very important. You can't customize them totally, but more and more you can customize the spaces. So where we did lessons were in these four spaces. One of them is called the Grand Hall. It's got a dragon that breathes fire. The kids love that, maybe too much. The art gallery where they could create art, a living room, and a garage. So we focused on different elements of language in each of those spaces, depending on what their teacher wanted us to focus on. We didn't want to just say to the teacher, we want to do research, let us do research. We wanted it to be useful for her. So in these various lessons, we focus a lot of them on vocabulary, because again, these are sixth graders, beginning language students, so their language level was very low. We couldn't exactly have them read Harry Potter. Their language was not nearly high enough for that. Here's how it works in Immerse. Here's an example of a lesson plan. And there are lots of different elements I can add in, different kind of multiple choice questions, prompts. I can leave out a set of cards that if a kid walks up to the stack of cards and picks one up, they literally, move their hand to see what the question on the card is in the virtual environment. So it's meant to make them interact with objects. You can't see very well, but if you look on this whiteboard over here, you can see some cards in red down there and 3 cards in black on the top. Well, this is an activity where they go in their avatar form and they have to grab the red card and put it in the right category up above on the whiteboard for the correct black card. So it makes it very active for them. And all of this is happening while Tricia and I are here in Illinois in VR headsets, and the kids are in Spain in their classroom in their headsets. So we're teaching them these lessons in VR, thousands of miles away, but interactively. It was really exciting. So we taught them weekly lessons, 25-minute lessons for 10 weeks. So it kept us quite busy. These I'm not going to talk about, but these are just some of the elements that a teacher has access to in this program. One of the reasons we've been very happy with Immerse is every time we gave them suggestions, it would be nice if, like, in a week, they changed the program and put in those suggestions. They've been very open to feedback, which is nice. I don't work for Immerse. They don't give me any money, but it's a pretty good program, I think. So how is this experience? I'm hoping this is going to work. Let's see what happens. There's a video here. I hope it'll play. If the sound doesn't play, it's no big deal. There's just some somewhat annoying rock music that will play. But this will give you a view of what happens in the world and what the kids are doing in the classroom. If it works, okay, good. So here you see the kids in Spain in their VR headsets. That's Tricia right there. I'm obviously standing behind Tricia. Diana, Dane, and Anian are all kids. We haven't started the lesson yet, so they're just playing around. So Anian has figured out, I can throw the garbage bag. Yeah. Boys. The girls always pay attention better than the boys. But now she's the garbage bag. But again, we haven't started the lesson. They were just exploring and having some fun. So you can see there's actually quite a bit that you can do in this environment. Here's another clip. This one is in the art gallery, and here we actually have started teaching the lesson. There's me, in my beautiful shirt and tie. Dr. Sadler, Trisha's over here. There's some of the students. Now, let's see if this is going to play. Oh, give it one more try here. No, that one's not going to play. That's all right. So in this case, I'm not sure why that's not playing. In this case, what we're doing here is the kids are taking turns describing one of the pictures on the walls, and the other kids have to guess what they're going to do. We did another activity in the art gallery where they're drawing art based on cards that they're picking up. So it's quite active. Okay, so what is the question? They're having a lot of fun. They're playing, but does that really mean they're learning anything? In this case, yes. We collected lots of data, right? Quantitative data, qualitative data. And we use something that's very popular in Europe. It's called the Common European Framework of Reference. This is used by countries across Europe so that they have a way to compare people learning Spanish and French and German and Italian and all these different languages. So they have a lot of different elements they look at. The Common European Framework of Reference is something like 400 pages long. It's a very big thing. And what we found was the kids working in VR, they performed significantly higher. And what does that mean? So here's some examples. Oral comprehension, they performed at this level. But the normal level for kids at this grade is A1. So this is A1, B1, B2. So 2 levels higher. Reading comprehension, also above. Oral production, also above in several ways. Mediation, how do they interact? How do they interpret the directions? Also above. So in all of these key areas for the teacher, by using the VR lessons, they were performing substantially better than they were in their classroom. She was also very impressed, this is not a new finding, that some of the kids who were very, very shy in class and very rarely talked a lot in VR, which is nice because they're kind of hiding behind a mask, right? They're hiding behind their avatar. So lots of interesting findings. But the big question is, with any of this technology, because these aren't cheap, should a school invest? Is it worthwhile? Well, my personal opinion is probably. The company that makes these, Meta, right now is building 10 schools in they say the metaverse. It's not the metaverse. They're building 10 schools, paying $150 million as they're building these schools for some universities around the world. So they're investing heavily in this technology. Meta is coming out with a new headset next month, by the way, that is going to also include some new technology that will do some really, really interesting different things. So this technology is, again, not cheap, but it opens interesting possibilities. The research I've got coming up, I'll do another study with kids in Spain. I'm also working on a project right now to do an exchange between students at University of Illinois and a university in China. Next semester, an exchange between University of Illinois students studying Japanese and students in Japan studying English. So there's a lot of research going on right now. And for this kind of student-to-student cooperation and meetings, I think there's some really fantastic things that we could do. So that's it for my presentation, and I'm hoping maybe there'll be some questions that people might have, and I wanted to leave some time for that. So if anybody has questions or comments or complaints, if you want your money back, well, don't talk to me about that. Won't get your money back. If you want a bibliography, by the way, there's a QR code. The QR code will take you to a short bibliography, some of the stuff in the presentation. I'm going to leave this for a second, and then I'm going to pop it back to the other slide so people have access to my email address, because I really mean it. If anybody wants to explore Education Island and Second Life, or just chat about VR stuff. I'm happy to do it. Okay.
Okay, thank
Anybody
you,
wanted
Professor
that?
Sadler.
Okay, I'm gonna go back there, and then I'm going to stop sharing screens.
All right, thanks a lot for your exciting and interesting presentation. So I guess we have about 8 or 9 minutes for questions and answers. Um, if you have any question for those who have, attend the session on site, you can just come forward down the aisle, and somebody should hand over the microphone. And for those who attend the session online, you can just unmute the microphone and ask questions or let me know on the chat form.
Look at that scary looking guy on the screen. Oh, that's me. Oh.
So, any questions? Okay, while we are
Otherwise,
waiting,
you'll have to ask a question.
I may have some questions, maybe. All right, so let me ask you a question. So, have you tried the TBLT in the VR environment as well?
Yeah, well, and especially again, if we think about these different levels of VR, I've done a lot of task-based language teaching in virtual world environments. Partially because some of the virtual worlds like Second Life, where you can build things quite easily, that's pretty nicely situated for doing task-based language teaching. But some of the VR environments now, like spatial, which are allowing for more and more interactivity, are also nicely suited for doing task-based language teaching. So in spatial, for example, because you can do things like build environments or explore environments together, ranging from ones that are more focused on art to the environment to everything in between. It's pretty easy to devise tasks that will require the students to work together to come up with their product together. So as I said, VR environments are they're evolving. It's much harder to build something in a VR environment right now than it is in a virtual world environment like Second Life. But even over the last year, that's been changing quite rapidly. And my impression is that within another year or two, it's going to be relatively easy to build things in VR environments so that if somebody's motivated, they'll be able to create some pretty amazing custom things that they could use for their students.
Okay, thanks. Now we have a question on the chat, so let me read it out for those who attend the session on site. So the question is, thanks for the informative presentation. You said you referred to CFR, the Common European Framework of Reference, scales for learner assessment. What was the test you used to measure the students' learning outcomes?
Right, so in this case, what we were doing is, I didn't really talk about this, but we had video recordings going on in the classroom setting in Spain, right? So the kids doing face-to-face work in Spain were being videotaped. And then we also had 2 separate recordings going on in the VR environment. So we were capturing all the language that the students were producing. That language we could then peg to the CEFR criteria. And again, if you look at the CEFR criteria, for some of those different elements, like I talked about towards the end of the presentation, they'll have pages of different descriptors about what should a student be able to do at this level, So there isn't really the magical CEFR exam. There is some interpretation that has to be involved in when you are dealing with the CEFR, but there's enough detail that it allows you to pretty accurately determine someone's level. So myself and Melinda Dooley and Tricia Thrasher were all looking at the face-to-face recordings and the VR recordings and comparing those to the CFR standards to determine the level the students were at in those 2 environments.
Okay. Okay, we have a question here. So can you please come down the aisle? Okay, you can stay there.
Thanks a lot
Micro. Hold on, please. I don't think the microphone is working.
As that's going, let me mention there's another question that was in the chat. I
Oh,
wonder if the students stayed on task throughout the task, the novelty of the metaverse may enhance, but at the same time, easy to get distracted. Oh yeah, 100% true. Sixth graders especially. Older students, much less of a problem, but sixth graders, as I said in an earlier presentation, it's a bit like trying to herd cats, right? Trying to control a group of crazy cats all together because they're sixth graders. They're very young. What we found is the first time we were together, craziness, craziness, craziness. But as they went on, they stayed more on task and more on task because it wasn't as new to them. However, they didn't get tired of being in VR. So, sometimes it's the novelty factor. So, but it wasn't just the novelty factor because they stuck with it and they still kept producing language at a pretty high level as it went on, which was great. Yeah, AR setting I think would be really interesting as well. The other language exchanges, the Chinese one is kind of a mix. We'll do some things like Zoom, a bit in VR. VR in China is very difficult right now though, because until maybe now, they couldn't use Meta at all because it required Facebook. That's just changed, but China is still not allowing it in. The Japanese one will be almost entirely on the Quest 2 headsets for VR. We use spatial quite a bit for that, actually.
okay. Let me take the question here now.
Okay, thanks a lot for your presentation. Well, I'm also a graduate of University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. 1990, May 1990. Yeah, long ago. But anyway, so
Not that long ago.
yeah. So I remember what you have talked about because I was also working at the microcomputer lab as a research assistant as well. But anyway, my question is, now that I know that your assessment was really, matching with the can-do statement of CEFR, right? And that measurement was taking place after 10 weeks of, instruction in VR, or?
Right. Over the course of the 10 weeks, because we recorded all 10 weeks of instruction. So we were looking at their production over time. As you might imagine, the level increased as we went on. The first day, it was very hard to capture any intelligible data because they were just so excited. The first day we made the mistake of taking them in the room with the dragon, and in that same room there were bows and arrows. So we found out they loved shooting the VR teacher very quickly, and they loved to feed food to the dragon. So they didn't produce a whole lot of language the first day, but with the other ones, they produced more and more as we went.
And perhaps that also has to do with when the sixth graders started English lessons. Do you have that information?
Yes, in Spain, sixth grade, sometimes in fifth grade, that's really when they're starting English.
Oh, really?
So these were very low-level students. Now, of course, as with any class, and especially you can probably imagine in some of the countries in Europe, even sixth graders, there's quite a range. Some of them come from bilingual. Well, they all come from bilingual families because Barcelona, the first language is Catalan. Yeah. But they all pretty much speak Catalan and Spanish. But some of them come from families where they're also using English or another language as well.
Yeah, I've been there, so I know the situation. Yeah,
Tapas.
I've been to Barcelona. Yeah. Anyway, thanks a lot for your informative presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions, but because of the time constraint, I'll just accept the first one. And then if you have further questions, maybe you can contact Professor Sadler right away. Not right away, but directly by email. And I'm sure he's willing to answer your questions. Okay, so the question is, what could be some tips for instructions thinking about introducing metaverse in a classroom with 20 or more students?
Right. So step one is if you're thinking about VR, right? Because again, there's low immersion VR, there's high immersion VR. Advantage of low immersion VR, technological requirements are much lower. You don't have to have headsets for everyone. Some of them are even browser-based. You don't necessarily need a downloaded program. Second Life, you need to download a program, but again, there's so many potential benefits. I still prefer that one. If you're going to be in VR, or either way, step one, get in there. It's interesting how I've talked with some teachers who are determined to use VR in their classroom, but they've never just gone and explored. And I think that's step one. You have to get in. There's a lot of different apps. You have to get in and explore, and you have to understand the environment. Some are better for kids. Some are definitely not good for kids. Some of them are more social. Some of them are more restricted. So you have to invite people in. Right? And if you're working with students, sometimes one where you have to invite people in is much safer. And you can't know that until you actually get out there and explore. And if you're going to explore, ideally, you want to have a friend who can explore with you. Because if you explore together, that's how you find out how do you interact with someone else. If you want to hand something to someone, how do you do it in VR? It's tough to do that if you're just on your own. I think that's key. You've got to get out there and explore, and start to look at some of the research that's coming out. We're actually going to have a special issue of Calico Journal that will be coming out in a few 5 or 6 months. But it's all about immersive realities, and some of it's people using it for the classroom. But yeah, get out there, practice.
Okay, thanks. All right. Okay, so I'm afraid we're running out of time. So thank you very much for sharing with us your insight into the metaverse and the virtual reality and their usefulness in language teaching and learning. Hope you can you can go to bed now.
Yeah, and hopefully next time I can come there.
Oh, sure. Yeah. We are looking forward to it, actually. All right, hope to see you around then. Good night. Bye-bye. Thank you for attending.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
감사합니다.